Where you stay, I'll stay. When you move, I'll move. I will follow.
I once read that someone can live 40 days without food. You can survive for 3 days without water. That you can live for 8 minutes without air. But you can survive for only about 1 second without hope. Now you can dispute those numbers all you want, and they're pretty easy to challenge. But the point is made with that set of numbers there, that hope is essential to our very existence. And it is. Once someone gives up hope, life is over for them. Anyone. But for us, as those who have given our lives to Jesus and have placed our hope on Him, hope is a central feature. We began our first week by looking at 1 Corinthians 13, and we all kind of get love out of that text. As I mentioned it, that's the big highlight that comes to mind. But as Paul writes about this, he launches this with that interaction about love with this statement. He says, now abide faith, hope, and love. These three. In other words, those are the essentials. Those are core features of our walk with Christ. Core features of our redemption. These three, he says, are the foundation pieces of that. And we get that to some degree. We get the idea of faith. I mean, that's bedrock to us. We talk about that a lot. We get the love part. We talk about that a lot. But what has been a concern to me and what launched me on this whole thing myself was this idea that hope seems to be almost like a little hyphen in that statement. It's like the other two are in bold black and white, and this is kind of gray in the middle there. And yet, as I quoted the scriptures, I found that hope is to be one of those essential features of who we are. A hallmark. Something that is distinguishable, observable as people look at our lives, that they see hope there. Not simply a wishful thinking, not some kind of little abstractness here, but something that is very, very real. I tossed out to you the very first week and revisited each week the idea of a possible definition for it. And that hope is faith that actively anticipates the future. Faith that actively anticipates the future. Paul wrote to the Ephesian believers and said, before coming to know Christ, you had no hope. I mean, realistically, you had no hope. And you're without Christ in this world. Peter, in his first letter, wrote to those who were going through a lot of rough times in their life and were being challenged at every point. He wrote to them and encouraged them to be ready to give a reason for the hope that was in them. Not for all your doctrine, not for your theology and all that, but rather to give a reason for the hope that is in you. And by making that statement, I believe that part of it includes the idea that your hope is to be visible. It's to be something that people ask you about. Why do you have this hope? Where does this come from? How can you be this kind of person and have this in your life? Hope. And with that in mind, that's where I'd kind of like to take us a bit today is what does hope look like in a life? What should people see when they look at our lives, those who have given our life to Jesus, those who have placed our hopes on Him? What should that life look like? So let me give you three characteristics that I believe are true. That hope manifests itself this way in our lives. 3 simple words. Joy, confidence, and longing. Joy, confidence, and longing. Now those should sound kind of appealing to us even. As we hear those things, I kind of like that. Maybe not the last one as much. But at least the first 2 I can kind of go for. Joy, confidence, and longing. So take a look at these words. First one, idea of joy. That hope changes my emotional response to life. Particularly as we've kind of defined it over these past few weeks. Hope is something that changes my emotional response to life. In the book of Romans 12, verse 12, there's kind of a list of things that are to be markers of our life. And one of those is not just the idea of hope being there, but it's pitched this way, rejoicing in hope. And you see what there's an emotional charge to it. It's not just you have hope, but rejoicing in this. That there's to be an emotional charge of you. If you look through the scriptures, a whole bunch of statements that sound just like this one. I pulled this one out of it. A rejoicing, an emotional response to life that is different from those around us. Different from those who don't have this hope that we have been given. By mentioning this joy, I'm not talking about something that's kind of a shallow, Pollyanna kind of view of life. We tried to make a point of that last week. The hope that we have doesn't minimize life as we experience it. It doesn't somehow take the difficult things in life, the unfair things in life, the injustices, the drama and trauma and all that stuff, and somehow say, it's all fine. Because if you're in the midst of that, you're saying, it's not all fine. It hurts, right? It confuses and twists us and cranks us around. Life does that. And if you're in one of those spaces right now where that's not happening, enjoy it. Because it doesn't last long. I mean, that's the reality of life. It happens. And the hope that we have doesn't minimize that or remove it. It doesn't somehow trivialize it. It recognizes, yes, this is a reality. It just is. But our hope brings in alongside it another story. A bigger story. One that allows us to see things in a different perspective. A reality that has a whole new narrative to it. And it also is true. And the difference of going through a situation is which story, which narrative you're going to play off of. And if you play off of just your experience here, it's devastating. And you can try and shore yourself up and make it through this thing. Or as those who have placed our hope in Jesus and have chosen to, we place ourselves into the other narrative. We played that narrative, which doesn't take this one away, but it changes everything. When you're able to take your story and put it inside this larger story and allow that to be what's defining your experience in the present. When Paul writes, rejoicing in hope, it's worth to take a few moments and just think about this word rejoicing. Because it's not simply a command to be joyful. When the scriptures talk about rejoicing in something, it's not just, okay, come on. Come on. Joyful, be joyful. You try and command your emotions to do that. You're in the midst of something, I'm going to be joyful. And you know how well that works, right? It doesn't. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you can do some weird things in your head, maybe make it work. But that's not the idea. When the scriptures talk about rejoicing, it's an active choice. It's a decision inside yourself to place your mind on what brings you joy. So, you can kind of move that into any area of life. Whatever brings you joy, if you choose to put your mind there, that it automatically shifts things. That's where your joy comes from. So, like for us, one of those, I had to bring this in, is Elliot, our granddaughter. So all I have to do is think of one of the images of her, which now would have been a great time to go click. And I was all set. But that brings joy, because I put my mind there. And that's the idea. Now, from a biblical standpoint, from what we're coming from in our as those who have found redemption in Jesus. The idea is to put your joy, if you put your mind on the person of Jesus and what he has brought to us and what he holds for us, to put your mind there is that which brings joy. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But it's that idea that it's not commanding your emotions to suddenly kind of jump up, but it's putting your mind on what brings you joy, therefore it kicks in. One of the things that I've been doing over the past, particularly intentionally the past week, but Ruthie and I do this all the time, is asking people, what are you looking forward to? That's an interesting question. To ask them, what are you looking forward to? Not in the big terms like, where your life is going and spiritual things and all that. It's just, what are you looking forward to? Now, if I was to ask you that this morning, don't respond. In your mind you look. What are you looking forward to? It's interesting when I ask that question, because the answers fall usually into one of two big boxes. Over on one side, if I ask you, what are you looking forward to? You'll see this kind of, I have no idea what you're asking, look on face. Looking forward to. Gosh, I don't know. Haven't thought about that. That kind of response. Or, it's still in this box here. I asked, Ruth and I were at a wedding event yesterday, and turned out I was sitting next to this woman that's probably in her mid-50s. And she kind of came across as a woman where life is more something to be endured, than enjoyed, that kind of person. So that makes the conversation a little hard. Because I'm not sure where to go with this here, because it's kind of that Eeyore kind of approach to life, like, that kind of look, So I asked her the question. I said, so what are you looking forward to? And I had to try, several shots, okay, what are you looking for? Like what I mean, like out there, that kind of, and finally she said, yes, I am looking forward to the day that I don't have to work anymore. I'm thinking, that's kind of a negative hope. It's not like it doesn't pull you forward at all. It's more like, okay, I have to fill in the blank. So what is it? Okay, here it is. Here's an answer. Is that good? But nothing that lit this person up. It was more like, I just can't wait for it to end. Whatever it is. Now, on the other hand, you can ask people the question and you get a different response. You ask them, what are you looking forward to? And it's like they flip a switch in something. It's like, what am I looking? Oh, there's this trip that's coming up. It's like 3 weeks away and I can't wait to go. And boom, the whole demeanor changes. The sound of the voice changes. Everything changes because they're there. What are you looking forward to? Oh, well, getting a new puppy next week. So whatever it is, somehow something kicks in. What are you looking forward to? My husband's returning from Iraq. There's something going on there that lights that person up. And what's interesting is if you kind of are able to kind of freeze the moment and step back and look at it, just to analyze what's going on here. That person, at that moment that they thought of what they were looking forward to, steps out of life as it is. It's not, the reality is still here, but for a moment, everything changes as they think about what they're looking forward to. And the emotional response shifts there. And there's something about that whole thing. We're wired this way. That as we think in terms of what we're looking forward to, which is that's that whole hope thing. Faith that actively anticipates the future. A positive future. As we do that, it shifts our response to life. And God is calling us continually as an act of spiritual discipline, a practice of ours, to constantly put our minds toward what is coming, toward what He has for us, what we look forward to. One of the marks that is to separate us is joy. Another mark is confidence. And that one also needs to be played with a little bit because it's not simply confidence in myself. That's self-confidence. And confidence is a great thing in life. I think it's one of those wonderful characteristics of anyone where there's, they feel confident and they kind of come across confident. And I enjoy being around people who have not arrogance, not self-centeredness, not, none of that kind of stuff, but someone who's just confident. But part of the shift here that hope brings is, again, there's a reality piece in it. We've talked about this. That the confidence doesn't come from me. It's the reality that I am not enough. And that I've encountered that. And I'm not trying to pretend that I'm enough. I'm not still trying to be enough in life. But I've realized I'm not enough. I'm not enough for my own expectations, much less anybody else's. And having encountered that, I have found in the person of Jesus someplace else to go with that. He is enough. And I put that whole center of things somewhere else. And the confidence in Him versus in me. There's a confidence that comes there. But it grounds my life in a person and in this larger narrative. Hebrews 6, verse 19. Says this, this hope we have as an anchor for our soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one that enters within the veil. There's this idea that there's a stability in life that comes with this, that I've anchored my soul somewhere, in a person and in a promise. In fact, you back this thing up, which we'll do in a moment here. But it's built around this unchangeableness of our God in His purpose and in His promise. And we anchor ourselves right there in Him and in what He has done and what He has promised to us. And there's a stability that comes out, a confidence in life because it doesn't depend on me anymore. My hope, as far as in this confidence realm, is not that God will do what I want Him to do. It's not a confidence that comes with, okay, I know that God's going to show up in this. That's our terminology of it. But God's going to show up in this thing and everything's going to change. That's often kind of our deal. I have hope that somehow He is going to change the dynamics of it. It's not a hope that God will somehow fulfill my dreams, my hopes, whatever. But rather it's a hope that God will be who He is and do what He does. Aside from how I have it figured out. My hope is that God will be who He is and do what He does. And I've put it all there with Him. Let me use things a little bit here. I have a friend that was telling us about this person's father was in the hospital, an older guy. A believer, a follower of Jesus, and was in, he had, I don't know what he had, some kind of thing where he'd gone through some serious surgery and all this kind of with this thing, and so the daughter was there trying to bring encouragement to him, and so she said, well, Dad, you just need to realize and remember that Jesus is here. That's a good answer. I mean, a good statement, right? In the midst of the situation, Jesus is here. And her dad, kind of got this strange look on his face, and he looked at her. So what difference does that make? How does that change anything? It's kind of like, what are you bringing this up for? And if Jesus is not where you're looking at, if He's not the one you're looking to for your hope, if that's not where you have moved the center to, that question kind of makes sense. What does that have to do with anything? But if He is that person, then the fact that He is present in your situation changes everything. The dynamic of all changes because you're desiring for Jesus to be who He is and to do what He does without any demands on my hope. Doesn't mean I don't express those to him. But I'm counting on something bigger than what I can even bring to him. Confidence is there. There's joy, there's confidence, and then there's longing also. There's longing in there. And this is really one of those features of hope that kind of sets it apart a bit. There's a longing that comes with it. That hope generates a yearning for something that is not yet. Something that has been offered to me, and I get tastes of it. I can hear it. I can kind of see it somewhere out there, but it's not here yet. There's a longing for it, for what has been promised. When Paul wrote to the Corinthian believers, and it was talking about how Jesus changes everything. One of the comments he makes to them, 1 Corinthians 15:19, it says, if we have hope for Christ in this life only, we are above all people to be pitied. If Jesus is only kind of our lucky charm to go through life, if it's only about somehow he's going to change things and we're going to live a better life, we're going to be better people, which he does say we will do. But if that's all it is, Paul writes to them and says, we are to be pitied above all people. Because it's not centered on this life. This is not all there is. This is not the big deal and that somehow, live life to the fullest because this is all you got. It's not it. We're playing that bigger story, remember? There's a longing that builds inside us as we anticipate something that has not yet been given to us. Something that is promised, that we get tastes of. We get little glimmers of it because of following Jesus now. But that intentionally doesn't allow us to have all of it now, because it's not about this. There's something bigger happening, a larger story that is unfolding. That's what we play to. There's a quote that is a fairly famous quote out there. I'm not going to give it to you because I'm going to change it. I don't want you to be confused with the two. I want you to remember my version, not the other version. So my version of the quote is this. It has to do with the relationship between faith and hope. That is that faith is hearing the music from a distant land. Faith is hearing the music from a distant land. Hope is dancing to that music. By faith, you look into Hebrews, and it talks about this, that faith is what actually fuels our hope. It's not the other way around. What we believe actually fuels the hope. Faith hears the music from a distant land. It hears all that God has for us and grasps a hold of that. But hope dances to the music. Actually, it acts it for us. I love watching, what's your daughter's name up here? Maddie. I love watching that. You couldn't all see this up here. I had a front row seat. So as we're singing these songs, you and I, we're doing our controlled singing. Where it's kind of like, okay, Jesus is wonderful. I'm trying to think of the songs I'm saying, as far as but you don't want me to try to do those. I'm just trying to create the counterpart, But Maddie up here, she got it. She's up here, she just dancing away and swinging around and stuff like that. And I think that's my soul. You don't see my outside, I'm doing this. I'm very controlled, I got it down. But I'm looking at her and going, you go away. You go away. That's what God desires from us. To hear the music and to dance to it. Have lives that stand out from those around us with joy and confidence and hope. Now the key here, to make this work, we have to think through again, how does that get enacted? There's one thing to talk about and say these ought to be true. Yeah. But what makes them work? What's the trigger points for these that allow hope to truly emerge in our lives? So let me read through. First of all, it's thinking about the truth. Now, with that, we kind of go back to Jeremiah that we talked about. In Jeremiah, in the midst of life that was the devastation of dreams that he's standing in front of and looking at his reality there. In the midst of that, he says, I recall to mind that which is true. I actively will. I'm choosing to think differently. I call to mind that which is true. I recall is the word he uses there, which means kind of reset. Okay, to bring it back in and to reset again. Because if all I do is look at life and kind of see it playing out in front of me, and that's all I do with it, it can be kind of a disappointing life, at least. But he says, I call to mind, I recall these things, the things that I know are true. And in his case, he actually gives us the content of what he recalls to mind, which is the loving kindnesses of God, the heseds of God. I recall these things to mind, these things that are true every single day and renewed every day. He says, I call this to mind, and therefore I act. This need inside us to re-sync over and over again so that we have that other story, the alternate story, the one that God brings in the bigger story brought back to mind. And think through again to have the truth play out in our life. The self-talk that we talked about last week. It's kind of like sanctified self-talk. Where we're choosing to bring truth back and actually tell ourselves what is true. That this one story is not all there is. There's another story that plays alongside it. And to think through that, to have that be part of our process in a day and throughout a day. In the book of Hebrews 3:6, the author calls his readers to hold fast to our confession and the boast of our hope. That's an interesting way of putting that. To hold fast to our confession and the boast of our hope. Now, the confession, much of the letter of the Hebrews to the Hebrews builds that out. It's what we believe is true. It's what we're confessing to believe. It's the statement of our faith. This is what I believe. But he pairs it with this. And because he's a Hebrew author writing to Hebrews, the parallelism covers over each other. In other words, it's like a restatement, the second part. Our confession, boast of our hope. I love that phrase. Boast of our hope. That we have something that is bigger than us. Something that captures us. Something that is really a boasting of something bigger. It's huge. The boast of our hope. Hold fast to this, he says. Later in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 18, which is part of that text that I put up in front of you there, it has a similar statement there. It says, taking hold of the hope set before us. Grasping it. This idea that if I don't, it's going to slip through my fingers here, and I'll default to just what I see in front of me. Grabbing a hold of this. The hope set before us. And notice the terminology even. Not the hope that is present or past, something that is in front of us still, something that pulls us forward in life. A couple of questions to ask yourself, because I've been asking myself these things. They're kind of in-your-face kind of questions, I think. Probing questions. One is, where do you believe this story is going? The story that you're in. Where do you believe the story is going, honestly? Because obviously it's unfolding. It's going somewhere. Where do you believe it's going? And unless you ask yourself that question, there's a tendency to kind of almost avoid it. Where do you believe this story is going? And the question that goes along with that is, what are you counting on to be true? Where is it going? And what are you counting on to be true? Are you kind of counting on the idea that you're earning points with God? My point level's up to here, so I'm good. Are you counting on the idea that you're good enough? Are you counting on the idea that somehow it's just going to all work out? What are you counting on? Or are you counting on Jesus to be who he is and to do what he says, or do what he does? Are you counting on the gospel in all of its full proportions to be true and to play out? Are you counting on the idea that this is actually heading somewhere and all of this makes sense in the larger story? What are you counting on to be true? So the first of these things is this idea of thinking about the truth. But the second piece is one that kind of takes it a bit farther, and that is to think deeply about the truth. Not just think about the truth, but to think deeply about the truth. And the biblical term that gets dropped into there is the term meditation. Not meditation like Eastern meditation. Empty your mind, and all this kind of stuff. Biblical meditation is the exact opposite of that. In biblical meditation, as you run through the scriptures, the idea of taking the truth of God's word and to stop and to think about it and to actually pair it with your own life. So it's like here's what God says, here's life as I'm experiencing it right now. How do these two pieces fit together? That's biblical meditation. And to take enough time to actually envision it, to think through what does this mean, how am I going to play out my life, and that's where biblical meditation goes. So it's not just thinking about the truth, but thinking deeply about the truth, allowing it to settle inside yourself and to have effect on how you think about your current experience and where it's going and how you're going to play out life. To think deeply about the truth. And then a third piece in it is not only to think about the truth, but think deeply, but think expansively about the truth. Now this is one that I want to, this could be a whole sermon, but I'm not going to do that. The idea is that I can only think about the truth I have. In other words, if I have a very thin understanding of what Scripture says, if I have a very thin understanding of what the gospel brings, if I have a very thin theology of who Jesus is and how he operates in our lives, if it's all thin, then that's going to define my hope. Because I don't have much to work with. I can put my mind on the truth, but I don't have a whole lot to work with there. I can try and think deeply about it, but I can only dive in a pool that's deep. And that in the scriptures in Hebrews chapter 6, the author takes us to this place. If you back yourself up, if your scriptures are open there, Hebrews 6 verse 11 makes this statement. It says, and we desire that each one of you show the same diligence so as to realize the full assurance of hope until the end. Now just prior to that, the verse ahead of that, he's talked about the idea that we delight in the idea that you guys have gotten a hold of stuff here. You've got this work of ministry you're involved in, and you're loving each other, and you're doing all this great stuff. I like that. But we want you to take that same diligence about doing ministry and plug it in here. And in order to get what he's talking about, you have to go all the way back to the beginning of this chapter, verse 1, where he says, therefore, leaving the elementary teaching about Christ. It was the basics. You just stepped into this thing. Jesus loves me. Taking ourselves beyond the elementary teachings about Christ, he says, let us press on to maturity. Let's move deeper into this thing, pressing on to it. And that's where, in verse 11, he's picking that line of thinking up again. Because he's developed it up to this point. He says, therefore, not only about doing the stuff of ministry, let's press deeply into this relationship that we have with God because of our redemption. Think deeply about it so that we have the full assurance of our hope. Not just thinking, not even thinking deeply, but thinking expansively about the truth of who God is and what he has done and what lies ahead of us. Now, I'm sure I'm out of time. I'm okay. 5 minutes? But I'm just going to leave you with this. Yeah, in Romans 15, take a look at this. Romans 15, verse 13. If I was going to leave you with a statement, this is the one I want to leave you with. Romans 15, verse 13. Paul offers this blessing to the believers in Rome. He says, now may the God of hope, it's almost like you have to pause each point. Now may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you will abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Now, capture each piece of that. First of all, may the God of hope. He's the source. Remember, the focus is not on the promises, it's on the promiser. It's on the one who is himself the great reward. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace, like we talked about today. In believing, there's the hinge. That's our part in this thing. Telling ourselves the truth, thinking deeply about the truth, expanding that truth so it becomes more rich and full, so that you will abound in hope wildly by the power of the Holy Spirit. Spiritual dynamic that shifts it. So, with that, I'd like you just, if you would, just close your eyes, bow your head, and hear this once again. This blessing has a blessing over your own soul. Now may the God of hope fill you personally, with all joy and peace in believing, as you truly take this and grasp it, so that you personally will abound in hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, we thank you that you have called us to something more than simply a good life. That you have not simply placed on us another layering of things to do and somehow make ourselves acceptable to you, rise up and be enough in this life. But rather that you have called us into a relationship with you that is marked by hope. True, authentic hope. Hope that takes whatever is going on in the present and transforms it, not by even changing the reality of what we're in, but by adding another story. A story that allows us to step beyond this. Our Father, we thank you that our hope is built on you and what you have done through your Son. That he is indeed our hope. A hope that not only allows us to hear the music from a distant land, but to dance. To dance in it. We thank you for all of this in the name of our amazing Savior Jesus.